Gigs are scary. We don't have a lot of time, and when we get in, we want to get straight to cabling up and then sound checking. The last thing that we want to waste all of our time on is setting up the initial settings of the mixer and labeling all of the channels. But how do we set up the mixer if we don't know what's coming on the show? That's easy. We'll use a template show file, and we will make our show fit our show file, not the other way around. I'll share with you the catch-all show file that I use for almost every gig, and I'll also show you how to make one using the M32 editor. I also use the same template on every mixer, so you can use Allen & Heath, Yamaha, or whatever mixer you want to tweak it to your own needs. Now, the most powerful tool on any show is EQ, so you should check out my free guide, 3 Steps to Perfect EQ, and I'll leave the link to that in the description. Let's dive in.
Okay, so if you had a rider, right, you would just go through and you would label all the tracks based on the rider, right? Because the rider would tell you kick, kick, snare, snare, hats, so on and so forth, 25 vocals, you know, right? But the point here is we don't have a rider. So what we need is we need our festival input list. So down here, I have my spreadsheet that I use for this. This is my festival patch. This is my go-to input list. So what I have here is I just have a bunch of channels that cover most of the bases. And if something new pops up, I have spaces to put in those new channels. So we've got kick in, out, snare, top, bottom, hats, toms, overheads, pretty standard drum kit stuff. Bass DI, bass mic, great. 2 guitars, 2 spare channels here in case the guitars go stereo or there's some sort of other instrument that needs to be plugged in there. 2 acoustic guitar DI channels. Again, DIs can be used for anything. Stereo keys, stereo synth, stereo tracks. 2 extra DIs, and then 6 channels of vocals. And this tends to cover basically everything that will come up for me. And if there's brass that appears, then maybe I'll replace these channels with the brass. If there's percussion, maybe I'll shove the percussion in these 2 channels. It covers all my bases. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head to my show file, and I'm just going to label it based on this input list that I've got. In the M32 edit, you just click here, right click, and then you can write like kick in, right? And then you got to really laboriously press enter and then kick out and so on until you've set all your channels up. If there's a quicker way of doing this, someone please comment below and let me know, because as far as I know, you need to right click and then hit enter. Like I said, it doesn't need to be the M32. You can do this in any offline editor to create this list. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that really quickly and populate my list. Once I've named all the tracks, I'm going to click here to see my DCAs, and then I'm going to set DCAs up for the most common groups that I tend to use, right? So it's going to be drums, bass, guitars, keys, tracks, vocals. Then I'm going to have 2 DCAs at the end for my reverb, for my vocals, and my delay for my vocals. More on that in a moment. So before I start assigning things to the DCAs, I'm going to just color code them quickly. For whatever reason, text to me does not stand out very well, so I like colors. It makes it a lot easier for me to identify what I am working with. And then also, when I go to assign things to the DCAs, you see that the color lets me know which DCA I'm assigning it to. That works well for me anyway. And these are just colors that I always use. So no matter what mixer I'm on, I always color my DCAs and my channels the same, so that I find it easy to find them. So I'm just going to send all of my channels to the relevant DCAs. I send these spare channels to the guitar DCA as well as the acoustics. And then when I'm doing the tracks, I also send these spare DIs to the tracks DCA. And I can also edit this once I'm in the show, but this is my starting point. After I've done that, I'll go through and I'll just quickly color all of the channels as well to correspond to the DCAs. Then I'll head to my effects, returns and sends, and I'm going to label them so I know what I'm sending to as well. I click here for buses and matrices, right? And these are my effects sends, right? You see down here, burst 13, 14, 15, 16. And I like to have 2 hall reverbs, 1 for instruments and 1 for vocals. I also like to have a plate for the vocals, just so I've got a choice. And then a delay, which I use for the vocals. So that's my reverb sends labeled. They're turned up and unmuted. And then I'll head to my effects returns, which are over here in this auxiliary and effects section. And I'll label them as well, right? Now, hall 1 is for instruments. So I'm not going to assign it to a DCA. Usually once I've set my instrument reverbs, I don't tend to play with them much. Hall 2, however, is for vocals. So that is going to go to my vocal reverb DCA. Similarly, the plate is also for vocals. That's going to the vocal reverb. Next up is my delay. However, I'm not going to assign the return to the DCA. I'm going to go back to my buses and I'm going to assign the send to my DCA. Now, why do I do this? When you use the DCA to control the send, you get a much more natural sort of attack and decay of the effect when you push it in, because you're sort of pushing what goes into the reverb or into the delay rather than what comes out of it. But it's likely that I will send some reverb to a vocalist on the stage if they ask for it. So then if I start automating the sends, if I start pushing the sends with the DCA, I'm going to change their reverb mix on stage. I like to have my reverb returns assigned to the DCA and my delay sent to the DCA. So now all of our DCAs are set, all of our effects are labeled. Next up is that we need to configure our effects. So we open up our effects section, right? And I'm just going to change it to exactly what I said I was going to change it to. A hall, another hall, plate reverb, where's the plate? Here's the plate, and then a delay. Where's my stereo delay? There we go. I just double check that they're all turned on, which they are, and assigned to the buses that I assigned them to. So that's 13, 14, 15. This happens automatically when you initialize a Midas M32 mixer or an X32 mixer. The last bit of housekeeping we need to do is we need to label our monitor buses, right? So I'm going to have the first 8 reserved for wedges or monitors, and then I'm going to have 4 available in case I need to mix a stream or use a group or anything like that. So I'll just leave them as mix bus 9, 10, 11, 12. But these ones here are going to be renamed to monitor 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. I'm also going to make sure that they are turned up and on so that when I send stuff to the monitors, it goes where I want it to go instead of me thinking, oh, what's the problem, and having to go turn these guys on. I'll leave these last ones turned down because I don't know what I'm going to use them for yet. Now it's time to get some processing going. So I'm going to head back to my channel strip, right? I'm going to select the first channel, kick drum. And I'm going to ask myself, what do I need turned on and ready to go on my kick drum? I'm probably going to be using a gate, so I'll turn that on. I'm definitely going to be using EQ, I'll turn that on. I'm probably going to use lookup, turn that on. And I'll probably be using dynamics, so I'll turn that one on as well. And I'll go through each of the channels and do this, just to make sure that all of the processing that I need is already turned on, and I can just grab the dial and dial it in really quickly to get started. If I head through all that quickly, I get to something like hi-hats, right? And I'm probably not going to gate the hi-hats, and I'm probably not going to compress the hi-hats. But I'll just turn the equalizer on and the low cut. When I get to my overheads, I will also make sure to stereo link the pair of microphones that will be my overheads. I'm also probably not going to compress or gate the overheads. What I will not do is turn on 48 volt phantom power when I'm creating my festival patch, because you don't know who's going to plug something into the stage box. If you load up your file and start sending phantom power to a ribbon microphone on the stage, or probably a better example is a smartphone or a laptop playing back tracks, then you might destroy it. So don't touch any of this stuff until you're at the show. You don't want to cause any damage. I'll also go into more detail on each of these channels, right? So I'm going to head into the actual gate section. So this is the kick drum. I'll make sure that the attack is set really fast because I don't want to miss the transient. And I'm probably going to set the delay about 200 here. And I'll also turn on the filter to itself and change the filter frequency so that my gating is really, really nice and accurate on this guy. Just means I'm going to get closer to the sound I want when I grab that threshold and turn it down. Now I head to the kick out microphone. Do you know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to use the key input, the sidechain filter. I'm going to select the kick in microphone to trigger the gate on the kick out microphone. I've made videos about this, I'll leave a link to them, but it's just me getting this ready so that when I turn my gate up, I get the exact effect that I'm looking for. And then I'll go through all of my channels that need gates dialed in, and I'll make sure that I am dialing in the correct effects. Next step, compression, right? Let's look at the snare, for example. I'm probably going to change the attack time on the snare and change the release time. I want a longer attack on my snare. I also might consider enabling the sidechain filter on this for itself and setting it to a frequency I know will trigger it, right? I'm going to tweak my attack and release times on every channel to get it to a position where I like it. So that's really important for things like vocals. Vocals, I know that I want a fast attack on my vocals and a fast release, right? And I want a kind of medium knee on my vocals. And I'll do this for all of the vocal microphones. And then when the show happens, I just grab the threshold and drag it down, knowing that I have set a good starting point for my attack and release times. Now, I will change this under the show. Like every show is different, requires different parameters for the effects that I'm using, but this is a really, really solid starting point. Another thing I will not touch when I'm creating this show file is the EQ, because A filter is one thing. Maybe I'm going to turn the filter up for the vocals to 100 as a good starting point, but I can't go cutting frequencies because I don't know what the instrument or the voice sounds like. I need to hear it unfiltered before I make any of these decisions. Once it's all done and dusted, you can just head over here, hit save, save a scene, and then you can save it to the desktop, save it to wherever you want, call it band. I've already saved one earlier. So then we just shove it on a USB stick, and when we get to the show, we put our USB stick in the mixer and we load our scene onto the mixer. Then it's just a question of making sure that the input patch is correct, that the inputs are going where you want them to. And when you get your kick drum microphone, no matter where you plug it into the stage box, you just make sure that it's coming into channel 1 on your mixer using soft patch, the routing in the mixer, and then you know you're good to go. And you do that for all your inputs and you have a lovely, lovely time.
I'll leave a video here on gating and I'll leave a video here on compression. Let me know if you want to see me making show files on these other mixers that I mentioned. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, goodbye.